We are in Columbia, South Carolina, and this is so much nicer and peaceful and warmer than the north. And it's November, and I have on basically a t-shirt. You picked a good spot to grow up and live, I'll tell you that, Joe.
Well, I didn't exactly pick it out. My parents did. But I'm glad to have come up in this part of the world, too. I am.
It's a place that maybe locals will say, you know, those Yankees come down to visit, right? And some of them stay here. But I have a different response. If you were from the north, and then you found out how it was down here, you'd want to stay here too.
Well, we do. The weather factor attracts a lot of Northerners, and I can understand why it would. But man, we have a lot at my church. Some of our favorite people, I like to say, unfortunately, are from Michigan, and all up in the Midwest. There were great people that we've really enjoyed since they've come down and contributed to our communities, and the South is, and South Carolina in particular, is attracting a lot of people who are moving into this area.
Let me put it another way. I've lived for 50 years up in Pennsylvania and New Jersey. I don't know anyone from South Carolina that decided to move up there and stay. But I know dozens and dozens of people that decided to move down here and stay.
Okay, now I'm recording this, and I want you to know that after you leave here, I will let these people know that you are from New Jersey and what you think about South Carolina.
Absolutely, I do. This is Billy Staples, and we're filming a segment of Before the Glory in Columbia, South Carolina. And today is a humble person. Besides being a Major League Baseball pitcher for the Brooklyn Dodgers when they were going to the World Series every year like the Yankees, not only is interviewing Joe Landrum fun, but when you see a pitcher that's not 6'2" with broad shoulders and standing out on the mound like a giant, when you see a pitcher that is your size, since I'm kind of the same size as him, it gives you hope, it gives you happiness. My most favorite thing about you making it to the big leagues is you, in all honesty, you give little guys hope. In that picture in your room, you're standing in the team photo between two giants.
Yeah, so that, I will admit that I knew that what my shortcomings were, and one of them was size. And that's become more important even now than it used to be. I mean, you used to see smaller guys playing around, but I was well aware of the fact that I wasn't endowed, you might say, as well as most of the guys that I played with, even at that time.
One of the other things that made you different, too, is in the 1940s, 9 out of 10 baseball players came out of high school, you know, played whatever ball they played, and went into the minor leagues, D, C, and, you know, went up the ranks. You were one of the different guys. You went to college. You got to after high school, you played baseball in college, and that was your step between high school and the major leagues.
Believe it or not, I didn't play high school baseball.
Really?
World War II closed out my second high school year. I went out for the high school team in my first year that I was in high school, but I borrowed a pair of shoes from a friend of mine. I didn't have a pair of baseball shoes, and I got cut the first day.
You did?
And cut the first day, and then we didn't have any more high school baseball during World War II. So I never played high school ball. If it had not been for American Legion baseball, I probably never would have played anywhere.
So
except Sandlot.
You got cut from high school baseball, but you got to play in the summertime because of Legion.
American Legion baseball. That's what saved us, our kids that were coming along. And we had good American Legion teams, but that was actually what helped me as a baseball player. Up until that time, all we played was just Sandlot baseball.
What? You're one of how many kids in the Landrum family? When you were growing up, you're one of how many children?
One of two. I had one sister,
Really?
but she was 5 years older than I. And the first 5 years of my life, my father we didn't even have a job.
Really? Because of the Depression?
I was born in December 28, as you know, and December 29, my daddy, who was with General Motors in Atlanta, the bottom dropped out, and so my mother had come to Columbia to have me because her brother was a doctor here.
Really?
And we never left. And Daddy didn't have a job for the first 5.5 years. I was in the first grade before my daddy got a job.
What?
We lived upstairs over my granddaddy's funeral home.
The families stuck. You're an example of families sticking together because they had to.
Well, that's what was available at the time.
When you say he did get work because the country had to come out of the Depression slowly, what work did he finally find? Because jobs were hard to find.
He went to work in a bakery here in Columbia for $13.50 a month. Weeks, pardon me.
$13.50.
He had been in the executive end of an office in Atlanta with General Motors Corporation.
Man, oh man.
My mother went to work for a department store here in Columbia
No
in
kidding.
42
Right.
for $16 a week. That was 8 hours a day, 6 days a week.
Now, do you remember your first job as you got to be a teenager? With the first way you made money?
Yeah, I worked at Walgreens
Did you?
and on weekends. And up until then, I had paper route. Everybody, you were really something if you had a paper route. And I had a paper route for 3 years. I carried the local newspaper here for.
Well, in the paper is the box scores of baseball every day. Did you have a favorite team or a favorite player that you followed?
Oh, yeah, my Detroit Tigers. I used to know the name of every Detroit Tiger and the Cardinals. I knew all of the Cochrans and the old guys were Detroit Tigers. And we used to have dice games where you roll a dice. I don't remember the details, but
Sure.
we used our own lineups. And I was a Detroit fan.
Are you trying to tell me that you thought Dizzy Trout was one of the good ones?
Oh, yeah. Yes, I did. Gehringer.
Hal Newhouser?
Mickey Cochran.
How about that big first baseman? His name was Hank.
Hank Greenberg.
That's a lot of home runs he hit.
Like I say, my memory, slowly diminishing, not engaging myself in this kind of activity very much anymore. I'm just not as close to it as I have been.
Well,
I've always, that's what we did. I mean, we played baseball in the summer and football in the winter. And I didn't play too much football. I used to just sit behind the tree when they was playing football.
When you were working at Walgreens, because you're just a teenager, do you remember? Did you give your money to your parents? Did you keep some of it? You know, you're a kid at work. What did you do with your money?
I used it for probably lunch money at school. I didn't eat in the school lunches, and we lived out in what you would call a urban part of town, and we had bus rides and things like that. And I just used money that somebody would have had to sponsor me to get from one place to another. It wasn't money left over.
I get it.
I can remember my mother come home every Saturday night with that little brown envelope with $16.50 in it, and she would take out $15. So it took a little tax out, and she would put $1.50 out for her church Sunday morning.
Really?
Sunday morning you did go to church, and she would take that $1.50 out and set it on top of the mantelpiece, and then the rest of it, went for whatever you could buy with it. Rent.
When you were getting near the end of high school, how did you end up going to college? Not many folks I know back then that I've talked to got to go to college. How did you end up at college?
Since an early time in my life, I had been told that that was a thing to do. Now, my daddy didn't go to college. My daddy was smart.
Right.
Unfortunately, most of us are not aware of that until the daddies are gone. But I don't know, I was just always going to college, and I was always going to Clemson.
You were always going to go to Clemson?
I had a cousin who went to Clemson, and Clemson was a military college, and he was a cadet colonel there at Clemson University, and that's all I heard. Of course, he later went on to college. He came back after World War II, after being involved in combat as a doctor, and was just going to Clemson. And I went up I had never been on the Clemson campus, had never even been there. And the first time I saw Clemson was when I got off the Greyhound bus with my little World War II front foot locker. And it pulled up at the bus stop there at Clemson, and I got out, and that was the first time I'd ever been there. But I went there on account of my cousin. I've always been a Clemson fan. I was born and raised right here in Columbia, South Carolina, where the University of South Carolina is.
Sure.
But I've just always been a Clemson fan.
Did you try out for the baseball team, or did the baseball coach?
No. I had gotten letters. I was offered a scholarship to go to Utah State, of all places, by an old scout from the St. Louis Browns. He had a French name.
Frenchie Bourgeois.
And he had told me that he would get me a scholarship to Utah. I said, man, out Utah. But anyway, Clemson didn't have any baseball scholarships, so I didn't go down scholarship. Coach Howard got me a job working in the mess hall and delivering the afternoon papers around the barracks. But we didn't have any baseball scholarships. I was just going to Clemson. Now, that's all there was to it.
Now, I'm going to go forward, then I'll go backwards. Am I not mistaken, but I believe you're in the Clemson Baseball Sports Hall of Fame?
Yes, I am.
Well, I'm dying to hear, right, rather than read it off of a card or read it off of a computer, you must have fared pretty well as a pitcher at Clemson to be in the Hall of Fame.
We did. You got to, let's see if I can put this in context. I went to Clemson, my first year was September 45.
Okay.
World War II was just over.
Yep.
And we were getting this great influx of veterans, most of them combat veterans that go back to college. And the oldest team that I ever played baseball on was at Clemson College. We had a second baseman who was 34 years old.
Really?
He had been shot down twice over Europe. He was a combat fighter pilot. Good ball player, but bad knees. And 1947 was the first year they had the NAA playoffs. First year, the big World Series. And we wound up winning down here in the South. We beat Alabama and Auburn and Virginia. And the next stop was Yale University, where we played for the college, for the eastern part of the College World Series. Remember, this is the first one. Nothing like today, for crying out loud.
Sure.
But the first baseman for Yale was Mr. George Bush.
That's great.
And we got beat that day, and we made 5 errors the first 2 innings, and it was cold that day, and our second baseman could not bend over. But we had the oldest ball club, like I tell you, that I played on was mainly veterans from World War II.
I get it.
And there again, I was just a kid. At 50, I had almost a semester of college in before I was 17 years old. And so I was just a kid on this team, but we had some good ball players. They were just old.
And by the team being successful, more people noticed you as a player on the team, so you got some recognition.
That's right. Well, pitching is that way, as you know. You know, if you pitching is like quarterback, you get more credit than you deserve, and vice versa. It works both ways.
Sure. How many years did you go to Clemson before?
7.
7.
After the 47th season, my sophomore year,
Right.
Branch Ricky's brother signed me in my daddy's living room for
Yep.
$3,000.
That's a lot of money back then.
Well, that's what I thought. I thought it was all the money east of the Mississippi River. But as it turned out, Mace Brown, who was
Sure.
a scout for the Boston Red Sox at the time, offered me $47,000 and told me if that wasn't enough to get back in touch with it. And I had already signed with Brooklyn for $3,000.
So
So,
there was a difference of 3,000 and 47,000.
and the guy pitched against at Yale, for Alabama, down here was signed by Mace Brown for $100,000.
Really?
So I didn't get in on it. People in my community naturally thought I got a big bonus for signing. I thought so too, to be frank with you. But I just spent 2 years at Clemson. Then I signed a contract. Then I would go back in the fall of every year
Right.
after the season was over. And so by January of 1952, they called me and said, "Joe, we believe it's about time you graduate." By then I was married, and we were living in one of these World War II little houses that they built, $16 and a half a month, and I'd gone across the river and rented an actual electric refrigerator for $2 and a half a month. Otherwise, the iceman came around
Sure.
to put the ice in the ice box. And we had a kerosene stove that you took a gallon jar of kerosene and turned it upside down and let it drip into the trough, and you took a match, and it was the best time of our lives. I have been so happily married since then. On dance weekends and football weekends, we'd have people coming up, going through the front door and out the back door. Just a good.
What city is Clemson in South Carolina?
No city.
It's not in a city.
It's in the town of Clemson. Population 2,000 or 3,000.
Really?
We're in a very small northwestern county of South Carolina, the last one in South Carolina before you hit the Georgia line.
Is there
Beautiful country, beautiful place.
is there another baseball player before you, after you from Clemson that made it to the major leagues with a big name?
How about Billy O'Dell? He was the first
Sure.
guy to go in the Hall of Fame at Clemson. He went in on the charter list in 1973,
Sure.
and I went in '74 as one of the first members. He went in as a charter member, Billy O'Dell. I still see him every now and then. He lives right up here in Newberry.
Billy O'Dell could play some baseball.
We've had a number of guys play Major League Baseball from Clemson.
Really?
And I'm sorry right this minute, Key, the pitcher, pitched for the Yankees for a long time, pitched at Clemson.
Oh, are you talking about Jimmy Key?
Jimmy Key went to Clemson.
Jimmy Key went to Clemson.
Went to Clemson. We've got a number of people played Major League Ball.
Wow.
The closer that pitched, we went with the White Sox for a while. They had 2 closers up there one time. Benson, we had this guy Benson that played up there.
Chris Benson came out of Clemson and did real good for the Pittsburgh Pirates.
Yeah.
Yep.
We've had a number. I can't think of these names off the top of the head.
When you signed this contract, you said that you signed in your dad's living room.
Yeah.
So the scout for the Dodgers came with a contract?
Oh yeah. Branch Ricky's brother. He toured the South. They signed anybody that could write. and later on, his name was Frank, and he swore that he could drive and sleep at the same time.
I understand that.
And the first spring training I went to, Roger Craig,
Sure.
who I played with in the Army out here at Fort Jackson. It just signed, and Ricky took me and Roger, drove us down to Miami to watch an exhibition game with the Dodgers. And I thought, if I ever get out of this car with this man driving, I never get in this car with him. I mean, he'd drive and talk to turn around just like that in the back seat going down the road 60, 75.
Was his name Billy Staples, or was it Ricky? I'm being sarcastic because I drive like that.
Well, he was something else, but
When
he
you
was the guy that signed me right there in the living room. And of course, he went through the bit. In retrospect, some things get real funny when they're not pitiful. But when he told us what he offered us, and of course we jumped right at it. You know, man, that was big time money. And he said, but first I'm gonna have to call the office and see if this will be all right. And he had just signed my teammate at Clemson for $10,000. He came from Woodruff to Columbia, and he said, I'll have to talk to somebody in Brooklyn. So he gets on, and he mind if I use your phone? Yeah. And I'm standing here, this big time scout fixing to call New York. I wonder if my phone will go that far. And he called up, sat there, and you know, this serious conversation. Well, we got this young man down here that been so he finally hangs up the phone and says, boy, I had a time getting that through. He said, but they agreed. I got a contract here. Hand it here. Let me sign it.
Now, do you know? Did you buy anything? Did you buy a car? What did you do? I mean, what did some of that $3,000 go
If
to?
I tell you what I do with it, first of all, it's going to make me look a lot better than I am. But you asked some question, I'll tell you exactly what I did. I paid off the mortgage on my mama.
Oh man. Well, that's a gift. That's a gift of parents fighting to raise two children, and your education in your arm gave a gift back to your parents. As you sit here years later, it's got to feel good that you gave a gift to pay. The child pays off the parent's house. Hopefully, it makes you feel good.
When I got through, I got the $3,000, and people think taxes are high now. I got a check for $24 because the government took $600 out of the check before I was saw it.
Really?
Oh yeah. Taxes are high, a lot higher then than they are now in a lot of places.
20% off of a kid's first check.
20% right off the top.
Wow.
I got the check in there now. I've got every return that I've ever made to the Internal Revenue Service, and that was the first one that I made.
Well, the next time I come through, right? My request is that I get to look in some of your boxes in the attic. I want to just sit here and do
I
nothing.
live not in the attic, and Bill and I'm glad I brought it up because I've got this stuff, and I know it can't be more important to anybody than it is to me, and yet I know I don't want to throw it away.
I don't want you to throw it away.
I got 10 scrapbooks in there to go all the way from the time I played American Legion baseball right on through.
Who kept the scrapbooks? Who did?
Well, in high school, my girl I was dating did a lot of it, and my daddy kept up.
Really?
With it, and it just I got some scrapbooks right on through every place I played baseball. We got some pretty good write-ups. I've told Bill, we've been through this morning. I never considered myself a major leaguer. I played in the major league, just like I was in the Army during the Korean War, but I wasn't in the Korean War.
I understand. When you were in college, back then, you know, there's different pitches. Of course, the fastball and the curveball. What was your best pitch in college?
My best pitch anywhere I ever pitched was the one that the other guy was not looking for. Now that's blunt, but I was not a power. I didn't throw hard.
I know, but you're not coming out.
But I could throw. I threw 3/4. I threw sidearm. I threw crossfire. I stepped all the way out third base and go between my damn legs sometimes.
So you would change where
Change.
you would release.
That, and back then, you know, you had your wind up. Sometimes I'd pump once,
Right.
sometimes twice, and then the next time he come up, he'd think I was gonna pump twice, and he'd be with his bat out here going to me, you know, his bat be here, and then my little fastball be right by his fanny, because he was expecting me to pump one more time, and I wouldn't. That's the way I got by. It was just a little bit of this and a little bit of that, and just trying to outguess somebody.
I was going to say, you succeeded in baseball with ability, but also psychology. You
That's the
outthought
only way I
them.
could get by without just outguess somebody. And the best pitch, the most glorious thing could happen to me back then is that the old big guys a lot of time would come to the plate with the shirt sleeves rolled up. Oh,
Sure.
They couldn't do it now, but they roll up the shirt sleeves, you know, come up like this. And my biggest kick would get 2 strikes on a guy, and maybe 2 balls, and he said, well, he gonna pitch me high and out, so he gonna waste one now, make me go for a pitch for 1.5 foot outside.
Sure.
And right down the middle, pecker high, strike 3, and the guy took the bat off his shoulders, you know. That just absolutely was my day. And I've done it plenty of times. I ain't kidding you. Get 2 strikes and no balls on this big son of a bitch, and just right down the middle of the plate, pecker high, and he's standing there.
So you were one of the pitchers that a lot of times you wouldn't waste a pitch. You would just go right for it and get that 3rd strike.
I would.
Man, oh man.
On the other hand, I didn't mind getting behind either, because
didn't?
I could throw any pitch I threw was all junk,
Right.
but I could throw any pitch at any time and get it over the plate. I feel like that I could.
Sure.
So I could be behind a hitter and still throw him a change, and it took me years. I used to preach, Bill, you change your pace. Best pitch in baseball is a change of pace. It'll
Sure.
make your fastball look better, all that kind of stuff. And so it didn't bother me to get behind somebody in the strike ball combination.
I got
But
you.
generally, I just figured the quicker you get it over with, the better.
How did you grip your fastball? What was there a consistent grip that you had?
Yeah, and that's something else. Now these guys I see with this show, they got long fingers,
Right.
and they can do things. They can mess with the fingers and put them in different places.
Right.
Where everything out fastball was right there.
Oh, okay.
That was the fastball, and never veered from it.
And you'd come over top. You'd come sidearm.
3/4.
Okay.
And every now and then I'd do a little bit of that, but I threw underhanded. And I throw a curve, major league hitter could, you know, if you watch it long enough, it'll finally get there. And he'd come by way of third base, way out, you know, flat, because it was thrown like, you know, Bill had a good overhand curveball. It went
Right.
like that. I never could throw overhand. But I'd throw a curveball that'd break a mile.
How would you hold?
Then I'd come back and throw it, but then I threw a pitch that would come in and it got a lot of hitters out coming in on him with the fastball.
When you in 1947, they called you up to pitch batting practice. You were saying?
No, you see, this was the year that we finished the college year in the first so-called World Series in New Haven, Connecticut.
Okay.
And so then when that was over, they said, well, while you're up here, you might as well go on with us on a northern trip, and we'll let you pitch batting practice, and we'll decide where we're going to send you. And of course, the northern then, the first time we went to was Boston. We went to Boston, Chicago, Cincinnati, St. Louis, whatever the northern trip was at the time. And this was 47. And I got to see a lot of what was going on with Robinson, you know, being first called up.
What did you think? I mean, every person, there's 50 states in America, and then there's the North, there's the South, there's the West. You come from the South. There's ways. The way of living is a way of life, but you were in all these different cities watching one black guy on one team get treated a certain way. What were you thinking in your head of what you saw?
What I was thinking, I'm going to be brutally honest about this. I kept thinking, I thought this only went on in the South, what I saw. Because I saw crowds of people at the train stations, and I saw people meeting the train to get Robinson off the train.
Really?
And carry him. He couldn't stay in the hotel in Cincinnati or Chicago. Oh, I don't know about Chicago. I don't make it not. But I saw some things that a Southern boy didn't know existed based on what he had heard all of his life.
Sure.
That's what